Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting for Tuesday, February 25th, 2014. I'd like to remind everybody that to check your cell phones to change them to the off position or to the vibrate position, and if you need to make phone calls, please take them in the hallway, or to make a phone call, take it out in the hallway. Thank you. The first item on the agenda is a roll call and determination of quorum. Brenda.
Peterson. Here. Nordstrom.
Here.
Roberts. Here. Wright. Here. Clayton. Here. We have a quorum.
Thank you. The next item is the adoption of the agenda. Is there any, I see my screen got changed up here a little bit. Is there any items to change on the agenda? John Roberts. I didn't. No, you didn't, or the lights are playing games with me up here. I got a video game going on in front of me here. No? Okay, all right. Is it just raise your hand for right now. It's okay. Yeah, all right, there we go. All right. I'll recognize, okay, very good. I just had a little video game going on in front of me here for the moment, so apologize for the inconvenience for all. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda? Second. The motion has been made and second to adopt the agenda. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Now it's the time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the committee on any issue not limited to items on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda, except by placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the aldermen present. And I don't believe I have anything that is from general comment. And I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand in the audience, so we'll continue on with consent items 1 through 27. And I don't have any speaker request forms on items 1 through 27. And I'll recognize Jerry Wright.
Want to pull item number 10 and
We'll do that after I get done with public comment, if I may.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were done.
Sure. All right. And I'm not seeing anyone from the audience wanting to desire for public comment, so the public comment session is closed right now. Now we'll go into the items to remove from the consent calendar. The chair will recognize Alderman Wright.
Item number 10.
Item 10. Go ahead. Yep. Chair will recognize Alderwoman Bonnie Peterson.
I'd like to pull item number 27, please.
Thank you for the reminder. Any other items needing to be pulled off the agenda? Seeing only those two items, 10 and 27, do I have a motion to adopt the remainder of the consent? Motion by Alderwoman Peterson, second by Alderman Clayton to adopt the agenda. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries with the exceptions of item number 10. And that is agreement between the City of Rapid City and Pennington County Auditor for the collection of storm water drainage utility fees. The chair will recognize Alderman Wright.
I make a motion to be forwarded to council without recommendation, as the staff is yet will be connecting a attachment.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded to send to council without recommendation. Seeing no other lights or comments, those in favor of the motion to send to council, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Item number 27 is acknowledge the cemetery improvements report, and I've asked to have a short report from the Parks and Rec Division. Chair will recognize Lon Van Dusen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just wanted to spend a little time here just to go through the improvement report, and then also have Craig Nichols here, who is our cemetery supervisor, who's been working on all the improvements for the cemetery. As you know, you already approved the new software agreement for the cemetery software, which we're really excited about getting that and being able to upgrade our record keeping system and having a capability of backing up our records, and mapping is going to be really critical, and we'll also be able to reduce the document storage and create some more space in our office. I was just looking in our records. Our office was constructed in 1964 over there, so it's really nice to have the improvements that we're making. One of the big issues that we're wanting to deal with is having a better internet connection to our office. Right now, we just have no good link between our city IT department and our cemetery office. If we install new cemetery software, the provider of that software is going to want to have connection with our computers too. Now, if we want to do anything, we have to actually physically take the computer out of the office and haul it down to the IT department. So this will be a great for us. So also wanted to mention too that we've been making some office upgrades, improving our HVAC system, our electrical, adding some new furnishings in the office, so that our customers and families that come in will have a nicer place to visit. Craig and his staff of one other person have been working on insulating the office, putting in some new windows there, increasing the efficiency of the heating and cooling system there. We also installed a new, larger safe in the office to keep our maps and books that we cannot right now keep on any other way. A fireproof safe, so in case we do have a fire, they'll be protected. And lastly, we're also adding an additional person to our staff. As you know, our clerk retired the first of this year, and we're replacing that clerk position with a maintenance person who will be working out in the field, and Craig will be spending more time in the office taking care of the records and meeting with the public, doing more of the sales and working with the funeral homes, monument companies, and vault companies. So I guess with that, do you have any questions for us?
Thank you, Mr. Van Dusen. The chair will now recognize Alderman Jerry Wright.
I have addressed in the past and will ask again that we continue to look at long-term care and how we're going to fund it. And more importantly, I know that the policy is that monuments and so forth are basically the property or maintenance of the family, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So we have an issue. We have families that are no longer here, families of yesteryear that are long gone, that I think we need to come up with a program to maintain our cemetery and repair those monuments as appropriate. I'd like to have a comment back to the council, let's say in, 2-3 months? Would that be fair? Let's say by May. If you come back sooner, great, but let's come up with a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair now recognize Alderman Clayton.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Lon, just a couple questions. One of the things you mentioned was that it would be prudent to have a good internet connection. Are we doing anything at all to establish that connection, that communication for you?
Yes, Alderman Clayton. We are actually working with our IT department and bringing in a communications company to look at that internet connection, because the office is kind of isolated in the middle of the cemetery. It's not real close to any type of a hub for internet service. So I think, what was it, 6 or 7 years ago we looked into that, and it was quite expensive to run a new internet connection. I think it was like $6,000 or $7,000 to bring that into the office. We're going to relook at that. Hopefully it'll be cheaper, but regardless, we really need to have it.
Okay, and let me just add to Alderman Wright's request that, you know, when we talk about those other things, an update on that would probably be beneficial to us too, in the event that we have to take some sort of actions to help you in terms of funding. But it would be nice just to know what's going on. And then in terms of the new software, is that a simple file integration where you migrate files from one to the other, or is that a manual process where things have to be basically re-input?
I don't know that I can answer that. Maybe Craig, can you answer that?
Chair will recognize Craig Nichols.
It's going to be a little bit of both. We're providing them with as much information that we already have on file, and then the rest we'll have to build. So it's kind of a working relationship that we'll have with them to get as much as we can.
And any estimates at all, Craig, how long that's going to take in terms of either days, weeks, and months, or man hours?
Not at this point. Might
Okay.
be a while.
Okay, and that'd be another thing.
There's a lot of paper documentation that will have to be entered. We have basically a card catalog system still, and so a lot of that will have to be fed in still.
Does that fall uniquely on your shoulders, or do you have some help with that as well?
So far, mine and my staff.
Okay, so when you say your staff, then there might be other people who share in that
Or
responsibility.
two other people will
Gotcha.
help out with this process.
Okay, and then let me ask you this, a little bit of an unfair question, and I apologize in advance, but in that some of it has to be entered manually, what safeguards do we have to ensure that the information that's entered manually is in fact accurate?
With anything, with computers and typing anything, you have human error. There's going to be probably a few things that are, misspellings or things like that, but we'll do the best that we can to go back through and double check them.
Okay, and that would be another area where it would be nice to keep us up to speed as to how that's going.
Sure.
Thank you. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, and I just, the chair would like to also comment to you folks too, is you're doing the best you can with what you have out there, and I was amazed at what you are working with as for equipment and everything that you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So I want to applaud you for making this valiant effort to come forward with these recommendations and suggestions, and hopefully we'll find that remainder of the support for the city, from the rest of the city council for you on that. And I would encourage any other council members to take a tour with Greg or Lon and see actually firsthand the conditions of what they're having to deal with out there. I like to refer to it as we're bringing them out of the Stone Age, so welcome to the 21st century, gentlemen. Thank you, and good luck. Seeing no other questions, there is a motion to acknowledge. Is there a motion to acknowledge? Motion by Alderwoman Peterson to acknowledge, the second by Alderman Roberts. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you all for your support. Appreciate it.
Next items we have is for public comment period for the non-consent items on our calendar is to do with items 28 through 31. And I do have some speaker request forms on item 29. And the chair will now recognize Ron Burnell. If you would care to join us over at the podium. And if you need some assistance with those presentation items that you have there, we'll try to do the best we can to accommodate you.
Yeah, my name is Ron Bonnell, Chapel Lane Village Homeowners Association, and we have a problem basically with a particular street, Serendipity Lane, where some of you may have read in the paper this morning where we actually had a garbage truck that slid down Serendipity Lane last night and crashed into a car. And I've got a little handout that I'll give all of the councilmen here in a moment, but the way where this got started was, I'll read just the first part of it, the first paragraph or so. Last Wednesday, January 15th, 2014, I received a call from our newest board member, Dean Lindquist. He stated that we must do something about getting some sand on the iced-over street known as Serendipity Lane. He said that he had tried going up in the looping street from both sides and could go nowhere. 30 years ago, Dean had also volunteered to be on this board at Chapel Lane. And during that time, in the early 80s, the city of Rapid City, as a matter of course, would make a loop up and around Serendipity Lane with a sand truck when the weather called for it. So I went down to see what was going on at the Serendipity Lane. With a four-wheel drive and running start, I was able to make it up to the steep, slippery street. By the time I had gotten there, Dean had walked back to his parked car near Chapel Lane, a block away from the house, where he had to leave it for an appointment. He said that he could hardly stand up. Anyway, this dialogue goes on, but and I don't expect everybody to see it, but actually you probably can see it fairly well. This is, there's a loop right here in this road, and that's Serendipity Lane. And Chapel Lane is the road that goes out to Staufkirk Chapel. And what Dean was referring to in that, and let me get it over here where we can see it. What I was referring to in that is...
Ron, if you want to hand it to the staff
Okay.
or Bill, if he would be so kind, we can share that with the other council members. Thank you.
And what he was referring to in there was when the homeowners associations were annexed into the city, they did it with certain agreements. And I'm going to hold up another one of these real quick, and I'll come back to that Google map. But this side over here, all of this is Chapel Valley Homeowners Association here. And in this red is Chapel Lane. There are two different homeowners associations. When the city of Rapid City annexed those, that's that other. Oh, excuse me, Tim. Consistency here. When they were annexed, the streets in Chapel Valley became part of the city, and they were maintained by the city. The streets in Chapel Lane weren't part of that. We have to do all of our own street repair and all of the snow removal on the streets and all of the rest comes out of a $50 a month fee that we pay in Chapel Lane. That's above and beyond the fact that we pay taxes just like everybody else in town, same rates and everything, but we have to take care of all of that on our own. But they had come up with an agreement to take care of, during winter months, of Serendipity Lane and simply make a loop up through there. It was a one-way street, make a loop, sand it, and then in the spring come back and with their equipment pick up the sand. And so that's what we're requesting today. We don't get anything else from the city, including garbage disposal and all of the rest. That's all paid through our fees that we charge all of our homeowners. And so we're asking for the city to consider going across this line in the sand that's been drawn for private streets, so-called, and it's a huge safety problem. And, you know, if we wanted to get a fire truck up in there or an ambulance up in there, we can't do it. I was asked this morning if we provided any sand now, and we do, and we pay a fellow about $2,300 a year, and it's basically inadequate because we've got some sand barrels next to the street, and then he comes up with a little pickup and spreads some sand on it, if he can make it up the hill to begin with.
Ms. Brunel, if you could wrap up your comments, please.
Yes, sir. So I have a couple of other people, and I'd like them to say a few words about it, and appreciate your consideration, and I'll get this copy to everybody as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a copy of it up here already. Oh,
And then these, if I could have that hard phone cord.
I'll ask Alderman Clayton to distribute the material to us. If I can have the next speaker come forward, and that's, if I'm reading this correctly, is it Donna Burnell?
I would just like to make a simple comment that I think the safety of the residents of Serendipity Lane is really being jeopardized by the lack of access. That could have been an ambulance that rolled down the hill yesterday instead of a garbage truck. And that's just, to me, does not seem something that the city should allow to happen, as well as we really do pay the taxes, and we see nothing from those taxes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. The next speaker request form I have here is, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this correct. Is it Michelle O'Toole?
My name is Michelle O'Toole. I live on Serendipity Lane. Thanks for taking our comments today. I've seen everything from FedEx trucks walking the packages up the hill during the wintertime to UPS guys trying to get up that hill. The bottom line is we do have our own association and we pay those fees. We pay city taxes. And it is ungodly expensive for us to keep paying that. And it's just one loop up around that road. So I would ask that you consider sanding that or even snow plowing it or whatever. Cut us a break. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker request form I have here is Dean Lindquist, again on item number 29. And Dean, as you're approaching the podium up there, just to remind everyone that we've got another item ahead of you, and as soon as we get the opportunity, if we need to, we'll bring you back up for follow-up questions. And if you have...
My name is Dean Lindquist. I've lived on Serendipity right at the top of the loop since '81. And for the first, say, 10 years, I was on the board. And at that time, they said we had it one way, they would plow it, sand it, and sweep it. Well, we lost the plowing first, and then the sanding, and then the sweeping. I don't know what happened. I don't think it would hurt them one bit to make that one loop. It's the only high place out there. Yesterday, that garbage truck was about a quarter of the way up. He'd come from this way, and it was about a quarter of the way from going down to the Chapel Lane. And he loaded at the apartment house, he loaded a garbage container. He just got it loaded, and the thing took off, slid all the way down the street and across Chapel Lane and into Woody Hanson's car. And now, if it had been an hour later, there'd have been kids on that corner from the school bus. I just can't see why that can't be done. It was at that time, and I don't know what's changed. We're still paying the same taxes as everybody else and getting nothing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindquist. Next speaker request form I have here is for item number 31, Mr. Steve Beardsley. And And as you're approaching the podium, Steve, just a reminder, we've got a 3-minute light session going here, so if you can make your comments in 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it. And then if you would recognize identify yourself for the council members.
Thank you. I'll try to do it in 3 minutes. My name is Steve Beardsley, and I represent Highmark, who's owned by Dale Schulke. And there's been a resolution regarding making Highmark a non-responsible bidder. I'll be brief, but this matter is already before a court on the issue of liquidated damages, and that liquidated damages were withheld from Dale or from Highmark, and we're in litigation regarding it. And the issue of the liquidated damages is before our state court. First of all, it's my position that this entity does not have the power to determine that someone's a non-responsible bidder for all future projects. The dispute centers around some piping that went in, and that the city engineer, through Ferber Engineering and through a guy named Bill Spickelmeyer, first approved the pipe and it was put in. And then Dale was shut down by the city through those entities, those people. And then he was allowed to put the pipe in. And there's been already deposition testimony from Dave Buck at Ferber Engineering, from Mr. Dale Tech, who was nice enough to come to a deposition, from the people at Northwest Pipe that have all said Dale did nothing wrong. He put it in absolutely right. The fact of the matter is the contract says if Dale's not at fault, and everyone has testified he is not at fault for this, it's not a contractor issue. In fact, Dave Buck specifically wrote a letter and then testified it was not his doing, it was Northwest Pipe. There's a dispute on the specs. The specs were initiated, and Mr. Muck and Mr. Bill Spickelmeyer were concerned about the decreasing values of the coating on the pipe that went in on Jackson Springs project. It met the specifications, so Dale was allowed to put it in. Then he was stopped when Mr. Spickelmeyer and Mr. Muck had concern about decreased values from Northwest Pipe. It's very complicated, but Dale then was shut down. He put it in just right. No one has said he did anything wrong. We're in a litigation regarding Northwest Pipe, whether they put the proper coating on, whether it met the specs. The deposition testimony now is that both Mr. Muck and Mr. Spickelmeyer wanted to change the specs. Okay? A portion was put in. They wanted to change the specs. They waited 6 months to meet with Northwest Pipe and finally agreed to these new specs. No one will testify that the pipe did not meet the specs, but they were concerned about these decreasing values. Okay? Took a long time to meet. During that time, Dale is shut down. Mr. Muck has testified, just as a matter of course, he sends out a letter that says there can be liquidated damages. He indicated it was just a form deal, and Mr. Muck then testified that Dale Highmark did not cause this problem. It was a pipe issue. Okay, so here's the first thing. One is, under South Dakota law, it has to be a bid-by-bid process when you're going to say someone's a non-responsible bidder. So as a result, I would ask that this entity not put into effect a non-responsible bidder. Secondly, we have before a court the issue of whether or not liquidated damages were appropriate. We don't believe they were, and we believe we have a right to interest. That's before a court. At this time, it appears to be sort of coercive to say to Dale, well, you want your liquidated damages back that we withheld, and the only way we'll consider that is, since you haven't agreed that the city can just have it, we'll put you on this non-responsible bidder role. Here's the problem to the city and to the taxpayers, and that is Dale at Highmark does a wonderful job for the city, and everybody will testify to that. The fact is, if you put him on this role, it hurts the citizens of Rapid City, because if he's the low bidder on a project that's coming and somebody else bids $500,000 more or $1 million more, if he's on this so-called list, then he can't do the project. It costs the taxpayers more money. So it's our position, I'm sorry, I've gone over the 3 minutes. It's our position, one, I don't think the city has the authority just to put him on this roll for all projects. I don't think that there's authority for that. Secondly, it's in court, and it's going to be determined. We're going to make a motion for summary judgment in the not-too-distant future to have a judge decide this. If a judge doesn't decide, a jury will. But more importantly, it's going to cost the taxpayers money putting him on this roll and Highmark on this alleged non-responsive bidder role, because he does good work. Everybody says it. Everybody says it wasn't his fault. We believe we have a right to liquidated damages, but we also believe that you shouldn't put him on this list because he's beneficial to the city, he helps the city, and he'll do an excellent job as he always has. And so we would ask that you turn down this resolution and recommend that the council does not adopt it.
Thank you, Mr. President.
If there are any other questions, I'll be happy to address. Thank you. And I'm sorry I went over the 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to indulge a little bit. So but we certainly have the prerogative to call you back up if we need to.
Thank you.
You bet. That concludes the public comment period, and I will close that right now. So we'll move on to items. Number 28 is the request by Lazy P Land Company Incorporated for water and sewer service for property located outside the city corporate limits. And the chair will now recognize Alderwoman Peterson.
Thank you. I'd make a motion to allow the connection of Unit 11 of Southgate Commercial Condos upon the following conditions. The owner must petition for the annexation of all units and common area located within the Southgate Commercial Condos. If the owner later withdraws the petition for annexation, city services to the properties within Southgate Commercial Condos shall be discontinued.
Motion has been made and seconded to allow for annexation with stipulations. The chair will now recognize, and the second was by Alderman Roberts. The chair will now recognize Alderman Wright.
I believe I have some comments, but the petitioner, Orville Davis, would like to speak. And Orville?
Very appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. The chair will recognize Orville Davis, please.
Richie? Hello.
Yes.
I'm the president of Lazy P6, and I'm here not to discuss annexation or connection to your sewer at this point. I'm here to request a building permit or a permit for a holding tank as that we are outside the active limits of a sewer line that can service us. So that's what I'm asking for. I would appreciate your answers. And if you have questions, Mr. Kosneski with Centerline will be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Orville. Chair will recognize I'm sorry. Jerry still has the floor. Sorry, Jerry. Alderman Wright, you have the floor.
A few days ago, someone asked us how we can, as a council, can take a 10-minute item and turn it into a 2-hour debate. It's easy because sometimes we're asked to make decisions on things that affect people, both sides of the wire. And if you've kept close look at the newspaper, we deal with a lot of issues, varied from A to Z. In this particular issue, I just want to make a comment, and we'll deal with this Monday night, I think. And that is that I think we have a border war going down here that I wish we could resolve. A couple weeks ago, I had a meeting with our staff and with the owner and the petitioner, his staff. And my understanding was we were going to look towards this connection along with a annexation agreement, I believe is the word for it. Is that right, Brett? I never saw that or effort. I don't think we had effort in that area. I'm a little disappointed. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I think we need to move to a resolution for all parties concerned, and I'm not seeing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair will recognize Alderwoman Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Nordstrom. I guess I have a question for our attorney, maybe Public Works, I don't know.
We'll go
apparently,
to the attorney.
what's the issue here before us? If it's building a holding tank, then we would deny as a lieu of offering a possible solution.
The request on the agenda is for allowing hookup without annexation, was my understanding.
Okay, well, that's what I
The
thought.
question is now if they want to shift it to, well, we'd rather just have a holding tank and not hook up to the city system. I guess that's a different issue, and whether or not you want to allow a holding tank in an area when there is a public sewer main right out in front. It's not a street, it's technically common area apparently, but I think that your public works director would probably have some comments on whether or not you should allow a holding tank on this unit.
Well, I guess I'm just confused to what the real question is here before us today. Is it to approve the holding tank, or is it to, is it the request for annexation?
If I can interject here, and I'll go recognize staff here in a second, but what is on the agenda right now is a request by Lazy P for water and sewer service for the property located outside the city limits. That's the questions before us. And then, so I just wanted to clarify, we did not get the request for a holding tank at this time until this moment. The chair will recognize City Engineer Dale Tech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Peterson, if I could perhaps provide a little clarification. The applicant obtained a building permit through Pennington County as part of the 1 mile jurisdiction the city has for, I think, health and safety is what you can call it. We do the permitting for septic or non-standard wastewater systems in 1 mile, within 1 mile of the city. The applicant requested a permit to put in a holding tank. We denied the permit because the applicant's in process of building a sewer main, which I understand is complete but has not been accepted, that runs right by the property in question. As I understand it, the applicant went ahead and put in a holding tank, which we issued a stop work order for, and he's here today to ask to go ahead and use that holding tank. Staff's recommendation is no, don't use the holding tank, hook up to the sewer that has been constructed right in front of the property.
And then if I could further clarify,
Certainly.
the reason annexation has become an issue is because the city currently has an adopted policy that says if you're outside the city limits and you're adjacent to the city limits and you connect to city services, that you are required to annex. At this point, the owner of the property does not want to annex the property, because if he annexed the property, he would be required to get city permits to meet city requirements. So he has avoided annexation of this property as much as possible. That's also why it's condo units and not lots, because that was done in an effort to circumvent the city's subdivision requirements.
So is this, I guess I'm still a little confused in that, is this is our vote to be to, is this an appeal to overturn the city denying their holding tank? You know, I don't know exactly what the question is before us, if it's...
Dale? Go ahead, Dale.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you clarified the item in front of you. The motion on the table is in regards to connection to city utilities. Okay. And staff's recommendation is to connect with the annexation of certain properties. As far as staff's concerned, the holding tank isn't even on the table at this point in time. That is what Mr. Davis brought to you today. That would be a separate action, in my opinion, by the committee if you want to take that action. But you know, the motion and the item on the table is just for connection to city utilities at this point in time.
Okay, so then what's before us, then my motion would still be appropriate. It's not to deal with a holding tank. Okay, thank you.
Chair will recognize Alderman Wright.
I'm going to go back to my border war reference. I love similes. I know in the meeting that we had a couple weeks ago that I certainly want annexation of this property, and I believe the petitioner eventually does too, and I certainly do not want any type of sewage treatment other than the state of the art, which I think is their intent. But I'm still a little concerned that we're still flighting around on this thing without any, I would say, organized effort, where we as the council can make an informed decision. My understanding, and I have to take issue with whatever happened between that meeting of 2 weeks ago and today, was that we were going to discuss as a council, at least that was the consensus of that meeting, that we were going to discuss as a council the location, the attachment or the allowance to access our sewer service, but in combined, that would be combined with the annexation agreement. That would make it so much easier for us up here to do that. And I'm just going to make a suggestion we refer this to council without recommendation, and let's try and get some things sorted out by Monday night. Is that fair? I'd like to make a substitute motion. We send it to council without recommendation.
I'll allow another council member to make a comment before I recognize your motion, Alderman Wright.
I guess my motion's inappropriate because I spoke first, so I
and-
withdraw my motion.
Thank
But
you.
I would ask a member of the council to send this forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wright. I'm not seeing any other lights, so if I can have that motion one more time. Yes. If I can just take a look at this motion one more time, is if the chair can have some latitude here making a comment about this motion, is that the motion that is on the floor is to allow ask the petitioner for annexation of the units, and then they will be allowed to connect to the sewer connection at that time, water and sewer service for that property at that time. So what we're trying to do at this motion right now is the reverse of what you're suggesting, Alderman Wright. Am I stating that correctly?
You asking me a question?
I'm asking staff, if I can go to the Public Works Director, is that we want to see them annex first before we allow them to make that connection.
Thank you, Chairman.
Yes.
I think that's an accurate statement. The motion that's on the floor right now is the one that the staff recommends. Like, we have spent an inordinate amount of time discussing these issues down here, way more than we would on any other development anywhere else. And at the end of the day, as staff, we feel this is the best avenue for moving forward. To ask staff to go back and sit down with the applicant and come forward with another recommendation, our recommendation's not going to change. At the end of the day, it is time for this area to be annexed. It's time, in my opinion, for this city to expect the development and the building that occurs down here to meet our standards, whether that's paved access, fire protection, appropriate screening around storage units, whatever it may be. They should meet the same subdivision infrastructure improvement standards and the same planning standards that we expect from everybody else in this community. And we believe that the motion on the floor is the only way to get there. It's not really a border war at this point. We have, in my opinion, done everything within our power to try to work with the developer. We came forward with the oversize agreement that, look, at the end of the day, has got all kinds of different phasing involved, so they didn't have to annex the whole thing to get their oversized money. We've approved plans that are kind of, I'll use the term piecemeal, maybe that's not the proper term, but we're bringing just water plans and sewer plans in different phases forward. Street plans will come forward at a later time. We're trying our best, but at some point you have to simply ask the applicant, if not now, when? If you're not going to annex now, when are you going to annex? And I feel like this is your last opportunity, and the only leverage you have left is the services that you provide. Now's the time to require the annexation.
Mr. Walstorf, I'll recognize John here in a second. Alderman Roberts in a moment here. But Terry, if I can recall here, we do have a policy in place plus ordinance in place currently, and I can't remember the date of that policy for the annexation procedure, but that's been in place for some time. Am I understanding that policy correctly?
We have a current resolution that deals with services, providing services outside of city limits or to properties contingent to the city. That one has been in place since 2005, thank you.
2005, yes. Yep. I just wanted to make sure that the committee members knew that we do have an existing policy in place right now to deal with situations that we are currently looking at as far as this agenda item. Chair will recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question for Brett before I go back to you, Terry. But I do want to say that I do agree with Terry. Ever since I've been on the council, we've been working on this. I mean, it's time to, I think, finally take care of this. Brett, if we allow them to petition for annexation, it takes roughly 90 days, right, to annex? And you're shaking your head, so I think you agree with me.
That's right. I think, the complexity here is we haven't in the past done a formal annexation agreement.
Okay.
This would be new territory for both the city and the petitioner, so I think we're going to have to add on some additional time to do something like that. It's not something that we can just hammer out in a week. So this is just a small portion of a much larger property, land holding that they have, and it would seem to me that, the lots that you're looking at today are just a small piece of the puzzle when we're negotiating an annexation agreement. In addition to that, we have the issue of the condominium on the property, and I think as a condition of annexation, we want that to go away in place of subdivided property, just like we would require of anyone else. So there's a lot of things to work through. So I think 90 days would be relatively short period of time.
My question would be, once they petition for annexation, we will allow them to hook up to city water and sewer, correct? As long as they petition for the annexation? And Terry, you can probably answer that.
I think that's our recommendation, as long as they brought forward the petition and ultimately was in our hands to finish through on our end to complete the annexation. It would seem fair to allow them to hook those two existing buildings that are out there on Unit 11 up to the services when the services have been approved.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The chair will now recognize Alderman Wright.
I beg to differ with the Public Works Director. There is a border war going on. And I think that it's not good. We're spending a lot of time up here as judge and jury. The same resolution, and I find this conflicting, and it's the one that we discussed in the meeting, I think, on February 7th. Yes, it does say that if the property is contiguous to the city limits at the same time as utility service, the property shall be annexed. That's item 2 of that resolution. Item A says the property owner will agree to voluntary annexation of the property at such and such. But item B, another part of the very same resolution, says the property owner will agree that should they refuse to consent to annexation at the time of the property because contiguous to city limits, that they will pay 300% of the retail. Sorry, folks. I understand English, and that's what it says. I'm confused. And yes, we do have a border order, Mr. Public Works Director. It's most unfortunate, and I think it's going to take resolution on both sides, both by P6 and us, to resolve this issue. And that's why I'm asking this go to council without action today. And I know I'm not making any friends up here right now, but that's not my job. My job is to be fair. My job is to, as I read documents and see stuff, is to say as I see fit. And I just see this as a conflict. I walked out of the meeting 2 weeks ago, give or take, with the understanding that we could do this as I read it. And I guess maybe I need to go back and study English a little further, because as I read it, it tells me it can be done. And we're going to have an annexation agreement that says this is when it's going to happen. And my understanding from both sides that that's what was going to happen, and it didn't. You know, there's an obligation in this process that both sides work together. We don't draw guns and start shooting. We work together. And I'm upset. Can you tell? Remember it.
Thank you. Before I recognize...
I don't think we'll even need to hear from you, Orville, unless you really got something to add.
All I was going to say is I'd just soon withdraw my request and make it a little clearer to people what my request is. Apparently you don't have a handle on that request. So if you don't mind, I just withdraw at this point.
Withdraw.
Orville, if I can get a nod of the head or something, you're withdrawing the request for the holding tank? Just want to be sure I'm
For
understanding.
this matter today, I will make the holding tank much clearer to you folks at a later time. It's a transitional request. It's not a permanent install. We need the facility today, not 90 days from now. So what I was asking for is a very temporary holding tank. And apparently, you've got the county believing that it should not issue one. You're unwilling. Doesn't leave us a lot of options, folks. So with that, I withdraw.
If I can get a clarification from the city attorney, Joel Lending.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I know an annexation agreement sounds good, but what would be the point of the agreement? If what are we delaying annexation for? If we're delaying annexation so these properties can pull permits and be developed under the county regulations and then be annexed into the city after that, is that something that we really want to agree to? And if that isn't the reason, then I guess I would be curious to know what the reason of the annexation agreement is. That's something that is possible, but as Brett said, it's not something we've done before, and frankly, if we're looking at an annexation agreement, we should be looking at an agreement for the entire parcel owned by Lazy P6 and not just this area, which is going to take more time. Ultimately, that policy, what was discussed at that meeting, it's a resolution. If you want to change it, you can change it. But by the same token, if you can control the terms by which somebody hooks up to the city system. And I guess the question, to simplify it in my mind, and I would hope in yours, is you have these units adjacent to the city. They're being developed. There are city services available. Do you want them to develop under city regulations and city standards, or do you want to let them develop in the county and then later annex into the city? If you don't want that, then as your public works director has pointed out, the provision of city services is a tool by which you can accomplish that. Maybe it won't accomplish it, but if that stops the development of this property in the county and in a way that doesn't comply with city standards, maybe that isn't the worst thing in the world. So the city council has a choice to make, and the property owner will ultimately have a choice to make. But I don't think that an annexation agreement is going to solve the issue for this particular property or this particular issue.
Is that a directed statement? May I answer that?
It's just a general statement. I don't know what the purpose of an annexation agreement would be other than to delay annexation. And the question is, do you really want to delay annexation? I would also say that the more units that get sold to other owners, the more it complicates a future annexation. Because now instead of dealing with 1 or 2 people, we're going to be dealing with potentially 5, 6, 10 different people, 10 different owners.
The chair will now recognize Alderwoman Peterson.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to table this per the request of the applicant.
Table or withdraw your motion, or
Well,
I'm confused now.
Well, the applicant wants to withdraw his request, so I'm trying to get it off our agenda here. Right? Is that?
Yes, exactly.
He wants to remove it, so I'm trying to formally do that. If I can get a second, I will continue my comments.
The chair is looking for
Well,
some
I think it's
clarification
essentially
because
the
the
same.
consequences of your tabling motion.
I'd suggest you send it to council without recommendation because this is a very complex issue, and I think we're shooting on the fly right now.
We've been asked to
We can
remove
make that
it, so I
decision Monday
mean,
night. We can decision that Monday night.
table it.
I
No
wouldn't.
second? Okay, well, I don't have a second because I need to go, but I will say a couple of things. All this discussion could be done off dais. And what we have here could be number 29 is coming up. We have members of our community that years ago, streets and all were allowed to be built substandard. And here we are, they're facing problems, there's safety issues involved because the council and their wisdom at that time allowed things to be done less than adequately. So basically, we're looking at the same thing, is we're allowing lesser standard, we're potentially... Oh, I'm just saying, I'm talking about this one. I'm just saying will allow the same thing. So anyway, I have to leave, and I think we should just get this off the table. The applicant asked for it to be removed, so I don't know why we need to wait till Monday night to remove it and bring it all up. I think discussions should be done off dais and not on dais. Thank you.
Chair will recognize, and thank you for participating. The chair will now recognize Alderman Wright.
Let me explain my understanding of an agreement. As per the discussion, I believe it was February 7th, and that is that the petition at that time was, as per this motion or this request of item 28, was to attach sewer service to the main that was under construction. In my position that day, and it hasn't changed for that event, was that, yes, I think we could do that on condition there was an annexation agreement. Now, how would I perceive that? I guess it may be a simple one-page agreement signed by both parties that would say the city will allow this on condition that you're annexed by a certain date or certain conditions, certain areas. That's what I would see as an agreement. Never saw that. Simple as that. I don't think it has to be a 6-month study, a letter of saying we are willing to annex, and I would certainly have voted for addition of that sewer service. Never happened. So I have not made up my mind up on 28, but I'm just asking that we resolve these issues so we can. That's how I interpret an agreement. That would set terms on both sides, that both sides are agreeable to, that would resolve the issues of concern. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion on the floor right now is to asking the owner for a petition of annexation for all units in a common area located within the Southgate commercial condos. If the owner later withdraws a petition of annexation, city services to the properties within Southgate commercial condos shall be discontinued. That's the motion I have on the floor, and the chair will now recognize. Nope, never mind. All right. Seeing no other discussion, is there any other? I just want to make sure I've got all the bases covered here, and we can also have this continued on further discussion Monday evening. If there's no other discussion at this time, chair is going to be asking for a vote. Those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Chair.
Oh, if you want to use your microphone, Bill, I will try to answer your question.
I understand what happened with Bonnie, but I understand also the petitioner has withdrawn the request. If the request is withdrawn, I don't see the need to. I don't understand. I guess what we're voting on.
Well, the motion didn't change.
Yes, if I can go to the
Nobody withdrew the motion. There was efforts made to either table it or take it to council without recommendation that weren't seconded. So you're left with the motion, the original motion that was made. So the applicant has indicated that he wishes to withdraw it, but until you make a motion that acknowledges that withdrawal or an alternative motion, the chairman is correct that the motion on the floor is the appropriate motion in front of you.
Thank you. The chair will recognize a motion to acknowledge withdrawal of the request from the applicant.
Make that motion that we acknowledge withdrawal, remove it from the agenda.
Just a second, Terry. I'm looking. I need to ask for a second first, and then I'll let you have the floor. I'm not hearing a second at this time, so the chair will recognize Alderman Wright.
The motion before us was requested by Lazy P6 for sewer service, et cetera. That's item 28. That's the item that was motioned on, I believe. What Orville said is he's withdrawing his application for a holding tank. Is that correct? I'm sorry. Could you come to the microphone, please?
I thought he was for the holding tank.
at this point, Jerry, I'd just rather withdraw the entire motion period.
Of 28?
On
Okay.
number 28.
That changes
We'll
everything.
readdress it at another time.
Thank you. The chair will, before I go making a comment, I'll go to the city attorney, Joel Lendine.
I don't have anything further. I was trying to buzz in to respond to Alderman Clayton's question about the motion.
Can we bring the motion back up?
The appropriate motion would be to acknowledge the withdrawal from the applicant.
So
I am saying that correctly, Joel? And I know there's more legalese that we could add on to it, but essentially that's the motion, is to acknowledge the withdrawal from the applicant. We need a second.
I'll second it.
The motion is by Alderman Clayton and seconded by Alderman Jerry Wright to acknowledge the withdrawal
Of item 28.
of item 28, the request by Lazy P Land Company for water and sewer service for the property outside the city limits. Does everybody understand the motion for the withdrawal? Okay. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Appreciate your help, Orville. Thank you for that. I'm sure we'll see you back in the future. Thanks, gentlemen. Item number 29 is a request for sanding and street sweeping on Serendipity Lane. The chair has not seen any lights, but I recognize comments from the committee. Alderman Roberts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to have to be going here in just a second, so I just want to weigh in on this real quick and ask Terry Waltersdorf a question real quick.
You may.
Terry, I was looking through our map of private roads in Rapid City, and it looks like we've got quite a few. Can you give me an idea of roughly how many miles of private road we have within the city limits?
We probably could generate that number. I don't have that number available right now. We did link a copy of the map that shows the private roads.
I saw that, and it looks like they're pretty extensive. Donnie, do you happen to know? No? Okay, thank you. The reason I brought that up...
Would you like us to generate that number for you? We certainly could.
Well, it would be nice if you could, if it doesn't cost too much time.
Okay.
But one of the things that worried me is looking at the amount of private roads in Rapid City, and this, I know how dangerous that is up there. I have friends that live up there. My problem is if we make an exception for you, everybody else is going to accept, they're going to be wanting us to make an exception for them. Do you have that in writing anywhere that we can see? Do you know, Terry, was there ever a contract made between the city and Serendipity Lane where that's actually on file anywhere?
I have not seen anything as far as a written formal agreement of any. I don't doubt that potentially at times the services have been provided. Donnie's indicated that we really haven't in his time here, but I don't doubt that it has occurred at different times.
Because I know that I've seen this multiple times since I've been on the city council where we've made exceptions for roads within Rapid City. And it's happened over and over and over again. And just because at a time we made an exception doesn't really mean there was ever a formal agreement made. Donnie, can you come up for just 1 minute?
Chair will recognize Mr. Brumbaugh. If you'll identify yourself.
Don Brumbaugh, City Street Superintendent.
Thank you very much, Don. This reminds me a little bit of one that we went through not too long ago off of 12th Street for the private drive up there, where we graded it, we did snow plowing, we did, but there was never really a formal agreement there either. This would be a lot different for me if I knew there was a formal agreement out there, if I knew that the city at one time, go ahead, you'd be happy to have you step up and...
Michelle, if you wouldn't want to come up to the podium so we can hear you. Oh, go ahead over there. Thank you, Michelle.
Donna Bunnell.
Oh, sorry, Donna.
That's fine. My understanding is that Serendipity Lane was made one way, but from the request of Rapid City, so that plowing, sanding could occur. Our other roads in Chapel Lane Village, the cul-de-sacs are what they call, I guess, hammerhead, so the trucks can't go in and out. But Serendipity was made a one-way street with agreement with Rapid City so that would allow the trucks to go through.
Thank you very much. Terry, if you could look for this possible agreement that's out there somewhere, that would be great. I've got a feeling it's going to be like a lot of other ones that we've had over the years, that it just happened, and it's unfortunate. You know, it's difficult when it's on a private road. Go ahead if you want to step up.
If I can take one speaker at a time here. Don, if you want to address a question from Alderman Roberts first.
Do you have no idea of any kind of a formal agreement in the time that you've been here?
Not in my tenure, no.
And you've only been here, what, 30 years? Something like that, Don?
Well, I was at engineering starting in '85, but I went to streets in '96.
Oh, okay. So you've only been there 20 years almost.
Well, something like that. One distinct difference between the analogy you made with 12th Street versus Serendipity. Serendipity's actually, or the property that Serendipity's located on, is actually owned by the association, where the 12th Street issue was platted dedicated public right-of-way, so there is a distinct difference there.
Yes, there is.
But having said that.
Yep.
Mr. Brunel, if you want to come forward at this time now for additional comments.
I just want to point out, this is not a private road, you know, that somebody has a street or something. This is a Rapid City street, Serendipity Lane is. All of the streets out there are Rapid City streets. You can ask anybody that drives up and down those streets, you know, whose street is it? It's not a private street owned by an individual. There's no question that it used to be a one-way street, and at the request of the city, Dean, will attest to that. No, there probably wasn't. In fact, I think maybe Don would attest to that. I don't know. But there was no agreement written in, and in fact, I'm not even sure that there's an agreement that says that we're not going to go up and sand. The problem here is we don't have a sand truck. We've got a safety problem, and it runs right across another Rapid City street, which is Chapel Lane, where yesterday we had a truck that couldn't stop and had to, and right across Chapel Lane. We got to have a little common sense, and when we draw the line and say, well, our street ends right here, and yours is over there, like Guest Road is another one where we butt up together like that, and we have a drainage problem there, and we have to work together on it. And I realize from a long history you can't, a lot of people don't want to make exceptions to anything, but this exception has to be made. We don't have a sand truck, and we don't have any kind of cleaning equipment to come and clean it up in the summer. And that loop is so easy to make. Your equipment's there every day that it's needed, within seconds of just making that loop and getting rid of the safety problem. This is a safety problem. We need to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Terry, so let me get this correct. These are Rapid City streets?
They are not within dedicated public right-of-way. They are private roadways.
And that's exactly what I was...
Mr. Roberts, if I can go to the city attorney for a second, maybe he might be able
go ahead,
to
Joe.
help us clarify.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to just reiterate that, looking at Rapid Map, they're the common area, which is why these folks are paying. I'm assuming, again, not having really seen the paperwork or being involved, but when this was annexed in, the street clearly wasn't built to specifications. It sounds like the grade may have some problems coming down, which is why the cars are sliding. It is probably going to be an expensive fix, which is why the city didn't want responsibility for them when it came into the city, because we could see the problems and didn't want the liability for them. and that's why these people became responsible for them. Now, from what I can see, they're not city streets. They are not located within dedicated public right-of-way. You know, I do have concerns about our liability if we take over maintenance of these streets, and then people are, you know, a steep grade is a steep grade, and you still will have some safety concerns even if we're sanding it. And then do we become liable for any problems? That being said, if there is a safety concern there are cars apparently sliding out onto a city street. You know, one way to resolve this, although the landowners may not like it, is to fix the street so that it meets specifications through an assessed project, and then we could take over ownership of the street and maintenance of it, and these folks wouldn't have to continue to pay to maintain the street. But the assessed project, obviously, is, if it's possible, is going to be expensive.
Thank you, Joel. I'm done, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair will...
Go ahead and let him speak.
Go ahead.
I'm Dean Lindquist. That street, all the time the city was taking care of it, we had no problem. There was no slipping and sliding down the hill or anything. And so why is it not the city's responsibility to keep it from happening again? It was very simple. One loop around, that's all they had to do, was one loop around that loop. 5 minutes and it's done. What's the big deal? Personally, I think if that's the case, let's see the tax deal. If the Chapel Valley, for instance, gets theirs all done, then Chapel Lane shouldn't have to pay the taxes, as much taxes as Chapel Valley. And we darn sure do.
Mr. Lindquist, I will take the compliment that you're providing for us about the city services. So if we didn't have any problems over there, I'd be happy to take it underway. But as our council has advised us, it's exposing us to some additional liability, and that's for our consideration up here at this time. But I just wanted to thank you for your compliments you provided for the city services.
There was no liability when they done it, so why can't they still do it?
Thank you.
I mean,
you bet. Totally understand. The chair will now recognize Alderman Wright.
If you don't mind, I'll give you a little history lesson. 72 era, that's when that area was subdivided. And yes, there was an intent there, I think, to go to a substandard construction so the profit was up and didn't have to meet certain standards, and it stuck it on you. I'm sorry. And the annexation of that area occurred in 1980. A little more history on that is the issues related to Chapel Valley in that area in the early 70s caused a lawsuit between the city and the county, where we ultimately got 3-mile jurisdiction to prevent such things from happening. Bonnie was right. You're a victim, in a way, of a bad deal. I know I was at Donnie's job for 5 years in 87 and 92, and I know we were in there a time or two to get a police car stuck out of there. I'm not aware of any agreements that were there. It's a tough situation. Can we refer this issue to council without, I'll withdraw that, I can't see that. I would like to see some discussion between these owners, and maybe where it's other appropriate situations, where they can get the street accepted to our system and maintained by our street department. Is that possible? Can you meet with these people and discuss with them what it would take to get their street up to standards? And I know it's tough because of the grades, but we got grades that are way worse than that. Franklin, Salaverty.
Chair will recognize Public Works Director.
We certainly could, although I'm seeing some raised eyebrows by the homeowners out there. But I haven't been out there. I'm not that familiar with how bad it would impact the driveways in the other homes. But the answer is yes. We could certainly meet with the homeowners and talk to them about options.
And let's also look at some tax equalization. If it is true, they're paying for private services, and they're paying the same mill levy that everybody gets snow service on. So I think maybe an adjustment is due. So let's take a combination look at this so that we're fair to them. Is that, I can't make the motion because I already spoke too much. But I'll say this, I suggest we go to council without recommendation on this, so we can discuss these options. In between now and then, hopefully these citizens can meet with our staff and we'll begin the dialogue. Because the liability, it's real, folks. We don't own the street. A truck goes up there, falls through, breaks up the pavement, we pay for it, and on and on and on. And it's not an easy, simple fix. Let's try some dialogue, see what we can do.
Since I've got one other remaining council member, would you like to make a motion?
I'm in. And I'd be happy to make that motion that we send this to council without recommendation. And folks, so you understand, we are just a recommending body. So any decision we make here is non-binding until it goes to the full council. So if we take that to the council, and then hopefully the decision would be made that that our staff would work together with the citizens up there to try to find a meaningful resolution.
Second.
Motion's been made in second. Just a clarification, folks, one additional comment is that this will be going to the next council meeting, which is this Monday evening that's upcoming, so your presence would be welcome at that meeting as well. So the motion is to proceed without recommendation to the entire council. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. The next item is from the Solid Waste Division, introduction and first reading of Ordinance 5973, amending provisions concerning garbage rates and refuse collection in newly annexed areas by amending the Rapid City Municipal Code.
So moved.
Chair will recognize Alderman Wright's motion and Alderman Clayton, since you're the only available second. I have a motion made and seconded to adopt the first reading of Ordinance 5973. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, thank you. Item 31 is approve a resolution 2014-21 declaring Highmark Incorporated and Dale Schluke non-responsible bidders on the award of future city projects. The chair will now recognize City Attorney Joel Landine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to respond to some of the things that Mr. Beardsley stated. The fact that whether or not Mr. Schulke is responsible for the defective pipe is irrelevant. He entered into a contract with the city in which we have delegated all of our responsibility for any of the subcontractors or any of the materials to him. There are multiple instances within the contract which make clear that he is responsible to rectify any defects to the workmanship or the materials at his own expense. And then his remedy is to seek recovery of that from the manufacturer of those materials, which he has done. Mr. Beardsley seemed to imply that the only issue in front of the court right now is liquidated damages. That is untrue. The real issue in front of the court is that we have pipe that doesn't meet specifications. The pipe, let's be clear, based on Northwest Pipe's own testing, the adhesion value of the cathodic protection lining within the pipe does not meet the minimum specification in the contract. Now, Northwest Pipe is trying to argue, one, that the specifications were too high. Well, that's just a ridiculous argument. The specifications were what the specifications were. They agreed to it. If they were too high, they should have said that before they entered into the contract to provide the pipe. But it's clear from the test that the adhesion value is decreasing significantly over time, and we are very concerned about the long-term ability of that pipe to withstand corrosive effects based on that. As far as the specifications changing, that is a real funny way to argue that, because everyone agreed on it. We could have rejected all the pipe. We negotiated with Northwest Pipe and Highmark to say, if you do additional testing to satisfy us, the pipe that you are now producing will meet specifications, then we will accept the pipe. Otherwise, we will not accept the pipe. They agreed to that, and now they are complaining that we changed the specifications. Well, yes, based on what we were seeing, we were not comfortable that the pipe they were providing met specifications, so we negotiated an agreement in order to avoid any further delay. It did take some time to get that done because, frankly, we had to deal with Northwest Pipe and get them to agree to it, and they fought us for a long time on that issue. As far as the other comments, even though these were mischaracterized as liquidated damages, right now, this is really retainage. We have the right to withhold payment for defective workmanship or materials until it is corrected, and we have retained enough money to provide the fix that we have identified as the appropriate solution for this problem so that we don't have to pay for that out of our pocket. If this goes to trial, not only will we seek to recover the amount of money necessary to rectify the deficiencies in the pipe, we will seek liquidated damages on top of it. So liquidated damages are a small portion of this. We have made an offer right now to Mr. Schulke to, if he is willing to get the pipe, do the solution we've identified, make it right with us, then we will pay him. That will cost less than what we've retained. We will pay him the difference in that. He will get a check cut as soon as possible, and I would be willing to then recommend withdrawal of this motion. He can still pursue his options against Northwest Pipe or whoever he feels are responsible for causing his damages, but right now, I held off making this recommendation. I know when this first came up, there were council members that asked, should we continue to be awarding contracts to Highmark? And I said, we're trying to resolve it right now, so I held off making this recommendation. It has become clear to me that we are not near reaching a resolution that's acceptable to the city, and as Mr. Beardsley indicated, he's about to start filing some motions, so I decided that the time was appropriate to bring this forward. We're done. Unless we can get a resolution that's acceptable to us, this is an action we need to take, not because Mr. Schulke didn't install the pipe correctly, but because he contractually agreed to rectify any defects in the workmanship or materials at his sole expense, and he has not honored that contractual obligation. And if he has not honored that contractual obligation in this contract, I think it's reasonable to assume that he would do the same thing in the future. And if the city and the taxpayers are not getting the benefit that they have bargained for in their agreement, we shouldn't continue to enter into contracts with Mr. Schulke or his company, or allow him, frankly, to be a subcontractor on any contracts that we award until he makes it right with us on this contract and fulfills his contractual obligations.
Thank you, Mr. Lundin. If I may ask you a question also in regards to the inspection process, it is usual and customary for the contractors to do the inspection of the material that they're installing?
Well, I'm not going to answer that. What I will say is that there was an initial test done on the pipe when it rolled off the assembly line, and the concern that staff identified is the adhesion values met the specifications when they rolled off the assembly line, and then our consultant came and did a check on the pipe waiting to be installed a couple weeks later, and the adhesion values had dropped significantly on the lining, and we've done some tests since then, and it shows a continued degradation in the adhesion value on the corrosive lining on the pipe. And that is not what we bargained for. We wanted a high adhesion value. They said they could meet that, and they haven't met it. And whether Mr. Schulke likes it or not, he contractually agreed to be responsible for that. So he needs to address his concerns to Northwest Pipe out of Portland, Oregon.
Thank you for the clarification.
We have a motion on the floor, do we not?
We do not have a motion.
Make a motion, we send this to council without recommendation. Call the question. Call the question.
Right now, I've got a calling of the question. Is there an objection to calling the question? Mr. Beardsley, would I make a response? No pressure. No pressure.
That's right.
Mr. Beardsley, your comments can be made appropriately at the full city council meeting this coming Monday night. So if you've got any comments then, that'd be the appropriate time to make it, because I do have a question being called here, which means we end debate and without objection, so we have to vote on the motion is to send to council without recommendation. Okay. Very good. Just want to make sure that everybody understand the parliamentary process in here. So the motion is to send to council without recommendation. Okay, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. No other items on the agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move. Or second, whatever's needed.
Unanimously adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.